dropping drastically as global fears rise. Experts predict a massive economic downturn.
Welcome to The True Analyst. This is an educational deep dive, data over narratives. Before we start, and I want you to hear this clearly, what you're about to watch is not investment advice. It is not a stock tip. It is not a buy or sell recommendation. This is an analytical framework built on publicly available data, government documents, and institutional research, and it could be wrong. It could be right. The future doesn't send us previews. Markets have a way of humbling everyone, including people who sound confident on camera. So treat this as educational content only, a way to think about sectors, a lens to evaluate your own research. If you put your money to work based on a YouTube video without doing your own homework, without reading balance sheets, without understanding your own risk appetite, then neither I nor this channel is responsible for what happens next. That said, let's talk about what the data is actually saying. Let me tell you about a WhatsApp forward I received in March 2020. It was from my uncle, retired bank manager, the kind of guy who thinks FDs are adventurous. The message said, and I quote, "Sell everything, market is crashing. Keep cash, buy gold." I didn't reply, but I remembered it because 3 months later the Nifty bottomed out. And if you had bought anything in April 2020, literally anything, you were up 100% by 2021. But here's what separates the uncle from the analyst. The uncle was reacting to fear. The analyst was reading the Capex pipeline. See, in April 2020, while the world was panicking, the Indian government was quietly finalizing something called the PLI scheme, Production Linked Incentive, 1.97 lakh crore rupees, spread across 13 sectors: solar, batteries, semiconductors, telecom, textiles. Most people didn't notice. They were watching COVID death counts. But if you had noticed, if you had understood that this wasn't a stimulus, this was a structural rewiring of the Indian economy, you would have known that the next 5 years were going to create more multibaggers than the previous 15. And they did. Suzlon went from 2 rupees to 80 rupees. Tata Power went from 30 rupees to 400 rupees. Dixon Technologies went from 500 rupees to 6,000 rupees. These weren't stock picks, they were sector inevitabilities. So now it's July 2026. The next 5-year cycle is beginning. And the question isn't whether there will be multibaggers. The question is, which sector will birth them? I spent the last week buried in government budget documents, PLI allocation tables, global investment commitment letters, and institutional research reports. And what I found is both obvious and invisible. Obvious because the sectors are right in front of us. Invisible because nobody is connecting the dots with the kind of capital flow data that actually moves stock prices. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 sectors that are receiving confirmed, contractual, non-negotiable investment of over 4 lakh crore rupees in the next 5 years. I'm going to show you why one of them is growing at 55% CAGR. And at the end, I'm going to tell you exactly how I would allocate my own money if I had to bet on just one theme for the next half-decade. But before I name the sectors, I need to show you how I filtered them, because without a framework, you're just guessing. I use 4 filters. Write them down. Use them for every sector bet you ever make. Filter 1. Confirmed Capex. Not announced, not planned, not we are exploring. Confirmed. Contract signed, money transferred, earth broken. If the only evidence is a press release, it doesn't pass. Filter 2. Policy tailwind. Is the government paying companies to do this? Not just allowing. Paying through PLI, tax breaks, subsidies, or procurement mandates, because in India, policy is the tide. You can be the best swimmer in the world, but if the tide is going out, you're still drowning. Filter 3, demand visibility. Will someone still need this in 2030? Not might need, will need. Non-discretionary, structural, demographically inevitable. I don't care about trends. I care about tides. Filter 4, global macro fit. Does this align with China +1, AI infrastructure, climate mandates, energy security? Because India doesn't operate in a vacuum anymore. When Google commits $6 billion to India, it's not because they like our food. It's because the global capital allocation machine has decided India is the next infrastructure frontier. When I ran every sector through these 4 filters, 23 became 8. Then 8 became 3. And then I made my call. Let's start with number 3. Sector number 3, electric vehicles and the battery ecosystem. I know what you're thinking. EVs? That's old news. Ola Electric already crashed. Tata Motors is range-bound. The EV trade is dead. And that's exactly why this is interesting, because the OEM trade might be dead, but the ecosystem trade is just being born. Let me hit you with numbers that don't get enough airtime. India's EV market today is $3.7 billion. By 2030, that's $23.5 billion. But here's the number that should stop your breathing. By 2034, the total addressable market for EVs in India is projected to be $191 billion. Let me say that again. $191 billion. That's a 55% compound annual growth rate. Now, I don't trust projections beyond 5 years. Nobody should. But even if you cut that number in half, even if you assume execution delays, policy hiccups, and global recession, you're still looking at a sector that will grow 20 to 25% annually for the next decade. But here's the critical distinction. The easy money in EVs was the car makers. Tata Motors, Mahindra, Ola Electric, those stocks already had their moment. If you bought Tata Motors at 120 rupees in 2020 and held to 1,000 rupees in 2024, you already captured the OEM re-rating. The next leg, it's not the cars. It's what goes inside and around the cars. First, advanced chemistry cell manufacturing, or ACC batteries. Today, India imports 70% of its EV batteries. By 2030, that number drops below 30%. Who's building the factories? Amara Raja, Exide Energy, Reliance Industries, Ola's own cell plant. These are multi-thousand crore Capex commitments with PLI backing. And here's the thing about batteries. They're not just for EVs, they're for grid storage. They're for data center backup. They're for telecom towers. The battery ecosystem is bigger than the EV market itself. Second, on charging infrastructure. India has 29,000 charging stations today. We need 400,000 by 2030. That's a 14 times increase. And the government just allocated 2,000 crore rupees under PME drive specifically for charging infra. But the real hidden gem, EV finance. Think about this. An average EV costs 15 to 20 lakh rupees. A two-wheeler EV costs 1.5 lakh rupees. The financing market for EVs is projected to hit 3.7 lakh crore rupees by 2030. That's $50 billion. Banks and NBFCs that crack the EV lending model early, that understand residual value, battery depreciation, and charging behavior, will have a 10-year compounding runway. So my EV thesis is simple. Don't chase the car makers, chase the chemistry, chase the electrons, chase the finance. But I have to be honest with you, EVs have a valuation problem. The market knows this story. The stocks aren't cheap. So if you're entering now, you need patience. This is a 2028 to 2032 payoff, not a 2026 payoff, which brings me to sector number 2. Renewable energy. I can hear the groans. Suzlon already went up 50 times. Solar is saturated. Where's the new story? And to that, I say, you're looking at the rear view mirror. Let me tell you something that happened in September 2025 that nobody celebrated enough. For the first time in the history of the Indian Republic, our clean energy capacity crossed our fossil fuel capacity. 250 gigawatts of renewables. That's a 3 times jump since 2014, but here's the part that matters for your portfolio. It's not just about installing solar panels anymore, it's about manufacturing them. India's solar module production capacity has surged 42-fold in the last decade. We are moving from being an importer to being an exporter. Vietnam, Africa, the Middle East, they're buying Indian solar modules. Why? Because China has geopolitical risk, and India has cost advantage plus trust. The government has a $360 billion investment pipeline for renewables. The 2030 target is 500 gigawatts. That's double where we are today. And then there's green hydrogen. The National Hydrogen Mission wants 5 million tons per year by 2030. Right now, we're basically at zero. This is 2010 EV early. This is the ground floor of a sector that could be $50 billion by 2040. But let me give you the bear case too, because the true analyst doesn't do cheerleading. Renewables have land acquisition risk. They have transmission bottleneck risk. They have polysilicon commodity price risk. And they have execution risk. Projects get delayed. PPAs get renegotiated. Discoms don't pay on time. So how do you play this? You don't bet on project developers with leveraged balance sheets. You bet on manufacturers with export orders. You bet on EPC companies with government contracts. You bet on companies that sell the picks and shovels to the renewable gold rush. Suzlon was the 2020 to 2025 play. The 2026 to 2030 play is different. It's deeper in the value chain. It's less glamorous, and that's exactly why it will work. And now, the sector that every other sector depends on, the invisible layer, the infrastructure of infrastructure, data centers and digital infrastructure. Let me start with a question. When you watch a Netflix show, when you make a UPI payment, when you ask ChatGPT a question, when your Tata EV updates its software over the air, where does that actually happen? Not on your phone, not in the cloud. Whatever that means, it happens in a building the size of 5 football fields filled with servers, consuming more electricity than a small city located somewhere on the outskirts of Mumbai, Hyderabad, or Chennai. That's a data center, and India is about to build more of them in the next 5 years than in the previous 20. The market today is $10 billion. By 2030, it's $22 billion. But that's just the headline. The real story is capacity. We're at 1.2 gigawatts of installed data center capacity today. By 2030, we need 4 to 5 gigawatts. That's a 4 times increase in 5 years. But capacity is just real estate. The revenue CAGR is what pays your dividends, and that number is 24% annually through 2030. Now, why is this happening? Why now? Why India? 3 reasons. First, AI. Artificial intelligence doesn't run on laptops. It runs on hyperscale data centers with specialized chips, massive cooling systems, and redundant power. Every AI model you use, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, needs infrastructure. And the companies building that infrastructure are betting on India. Second, cost arbitrage. Building a data center in India costs $6 to $7 million per megawatt. In the United States or China, it's 30 to 40% higher. We are the cheap real estate of the digital world, and in infrastructure, cost is destiny. Third, demand that cannot be stopped. Average mobile data usage per smartphone in India is going from 32 gigabytes per month to 62 gigabytes by 2030. 5G subscriptions are going from 132 million to nearly a billion. Every video stream, every payment, every AI query, every IoT sensor, it all generates data. And data needs a home. Google committed $6 billion for AI data centers in India. Amazon Web Services committed $12.7 billion. Microsoft committed $3 billion. These aren't Indian companies investing in India. These are global giants deciding that India is their next infrastructure hub, and the government knows this. They're offering 20-year tax exemptions for data centers, single window clearances, GST benefits extending to 2047. This is not a sector the government is supporting. This is a sector the government is begging to grow. But here's the investment angle that most people miss. When you think data centers, you think real estate, you think server racks. But the real money is in the ecosystem around data centers, the power infrastructure. Data centers consume enormous electricity. Companies that supply transformers, switchgear, and cables to data centers have a 5-year order book. The cooling systems. India is hot. Servers die in heat. Precision cooling, liquid cooling, HVAC. These are specialized technologies with high margins and low competition, the renewable energy tie-ins. Every major hyperscaler has a net zero commitment, so every data center needs a green power purchase agreement. That links data centers directly to our renewable energy sector. And edge computing. As 5G expands, you can't send every signal to a central data center. You need smaller, distributed edge nodes. That's a whole new asset class. This is the picks and shovels play of the digital economy. During the California gold rush, the people who got richest weren't the miners. They were the people selling picks, shovels, and jeans. Data centers are the genes of the AI revolution. I want you to remember this number, 2.3 trillion rupees. That's the confirmed cumulative Capex coming into Indian data centers by 2030. Not hoped for, not budgeted, confirmed. That's $27 billion of real money looking for real assets. Before I give you my final verdict, 4 quick honorable mentions that didn't make the top 3 but deserve a place on your watch list. Semiconductors. India's semiconductor market is projected to hit $100 billion by 2030. Micron is building a plant. Foxconn is expanding. Tata is getting into fab manufacturing, but the gestation period is long. This is a 2027 to 2032 story. High conviction, slow money. If you have patience, it's beautiful. Healthcare and hospitals. India has 0.7 hospital beds per 1,000 people. The WHO recommends 3.5. We have a structural shortage that will take 15 years to fix. Hospital chains with expansion plans, diagnostic networks, and health insurance plays. These are compounding machines, not explosive, but relentless. Fintech and digital payments. UPI did 185 billion transactions last year. The digital payments market is going from 3.3 trillion to 10 trillion by 2026. But this space is crowded. The winners are already dominant. The early asymmetry is fading. It's a good sector. It's just not a multi-bagger sector anymore. Space economy. This is my dark horse. $8.4 billion market growing at 26% CAGR, satellite manufacturing, launch services, private space applications. In space is opening up a previously government monopolized sector. This is 2010 EV early. High risk, potentially astronomical returns, literally. So, if I had to deploy my own capital, if I had to pick one thematic allocation for the next 5 years and go to sleep knowing my money is in the right place, I wouldn't pick one sector. I'd build a barbell. On the left side of the barbell, Siniska, data centers and digital infrastructure. This is my highest conviction, highest visibility bet. It's the infrastructure layer. It's non-discretionary. Every trend, AI, EVs, fintech, streaming, gaming, remote work, every single one of them needs data centers to exist. This is the modern equivalent of buying steel companies in 2003 or buying HDFC Bank in 2005. It's boring. It's essential, and it will compound for a decade. I'd allocate 40% here. On the right side of the barbell, EV battery ecosystem and renewable energy. This is my asymmetric growth engine, 28% to 55% CAGR, policy mandated, globally aligned with climate mandates. The demand curve is violent. The addressable market is measured in hundreds of billions. This is where the 10 baggers live. I'd allocate 35% here. And in the middle, the handle of the barbell, healthcare and semiconductors, defensive growth. They won't double in a year, but they won't cut in half either. They provide stability while the growth engines do their work. Hospital beds and chip fabs are 10 to 15-year stories. They let you sleep. I'd allocate 25% here. This is not stock advice. This is sector allocation. Because here's a truth most investors never learn. Picking the right sector matters more than picking the right stock. A mediocre company in a great sector will often outperform a great company in a dying sector. Sector is the tide. The stock is the boat. But I promised you the true analyst, not the true optimist. So, let me tell you exactly how this thesis breaks. Valuation risk. Several of these sectors have already re-rated. Data center REITs trade at premium multiples. EV battery stocks are not cheap. If you chase momentum at 80 times earnings, you can lose money even if the sector wins. Entry price matters, patience matters, execution risk. Semiconductor fabs take 5 years to build. Battery gigafactories need technology transfer that foreign partners sometimes delay. Land acquisition in India is a nightmare. Environmental clearances can take 18 months. The story is 2030. The pain could be 2027. Policy risk, PLI schemes, FAME subsidies, tax exemptions. These depend on government continuity and fiscal health. If the fiscal deficit blows out, if priorities shift, if a new government has different ideas, margins compress overnight. Global macro risk. If the United States enters a deep recession, global capital flows to emerging markets slow down. Data center investments get deferred. EV exports get hit. Renewable energy financing gets expensive because dollar borrowing costs rise. The framework protects your direction. Risk management protects your capital. Always keep 20% in cash or defensive assets. Always. If this video added value, hit the like button, not for me, for the algorithm, so this reaches another investor who needs to hear it before they panic sell their winners. Subscribe to The True Analyst if you want research that treats your money with respect. And drop a comment. Which sector are you most convicted on and why? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one. Stay analytical, stay patient, and remember, the tide is more important than the boat.